Hello everyone, welcome to the first video in the database CRUD operations tutorial series using C#. In this video, we'll be dealing with SQL Server database insert using C#. Now before we begin, let us start with designing of the UI. So, the UI must look something like this. I've chosen the example of a bookstore for this video. So now if I enter a book name and the author name, now if I click on insert, there you go, you have the item inserted in the database and it is being displayed in this grid view. Now how do we proceed? For that, let us create a new project. We need a Windows form application for the GUI. Let us name it okay. So yeah, let's proceed. Now we have our basic form. It is named form1.cs. Now let us see how do we create the database. For that, I'm using SQL Server Management Studio 2012 version. Yeah, so now you'll get the Object Explorer where you have to connect to the server. I'm using the local database server for this video. For that, the connection string is this. So let's connect. Yeah, now like we have connected, we can see all the objects in the databases in this server. Let's create a new query file. In that, we'll have to first create our database for the bookstore. Create database bookstore. Now we can execute. Now we need to, before we create the table, we need to make the object point to the database. So use bookstore. Yeah. Now we create the database. Create the table. Create table book. Now the columns in the table might be book name, author name, and the book ID. Now for simplicity, I'm keeping the book ID as auto increment. So for that, book ID is the name of my column of type integer, which should be a primary key. Now people who are not familiar with a primary key, it is basically a unique identifier for the table. So even if the author names might repeat, the book names might not repeat, but the author names might repeat, the book ID is the one which differentiates between two different books of the same author. So now that's the primary key. Now we need it to be auto increment because we are not going to ask the user to enter the book ID. So we will keep an identity parameter. This says that book ID will be auto increment in SQL Server. Now we will create the book name table, column of type var. Let's keep the length 100 and author name. varchar type 100. Yeah. Now we again select, execute. Now let's see. Select star from book. Here we go. We have an empty table with book ID, book name and author name as their columns. Now this is done. Let us go back to our project. Now we have an empty project, and when you click on the form, you get the form properties to edit. Let's first edit the name of the form to bookstore. It reflects here automatically. Now let's go down. We have the start position. Now the Windows default location will be somewhere here in the screen. Let us make it to center screen so that it comes in the center. It's your wish. You can have anything you want. You have a lot of options here. Now the size. You can have any size you want, but for our project, let's keep it like 70 340. Yep. Now that's about it. Now after editing the form properties, we need the form elements. So let's start off with labels and text boxes. For that you need the toolbox. So suppose you don't have the toolbox in your screen, then you go to view, toolbox, you get the toolbox, or else you can do Control Alt X, which does the same thing. So now let's create a label and let's create a text box. Now we need two labels and two pairs of labels and text boxes, so we created it. Now when you click on the label, you can edit the text. So let the first one be book name and the second one be the author name. Cool. Now we need a button. Why do we need a button? So that we can invoke the code for insert. So once you create a button, again you click on it, you get the text field in the properties, and change it to insert. Now if I have to change some properties of the buttons, let's go through it. For the back color, let me choose something like, these are predefined colors which I use. You can check out in colors.com or any other website which gives you RGB values for all the colors. Now let's see the flat style. Flat style is basically how your button must appear. Now let's change standard to pop-up. Now this will cover the entire button in the color. It will give you a more decent look. Now you have to display the values of the after insert in some grid view. For that we'll use data grid view. Now in the toolbox, type data grid view. There you go. You get a box. For now it seems a bit empty, but as and when we start coding, yes, so this is the basic form design which will work for insert. Yeah. Now let's go about it. We have the UI in place, we have the database in place. All we have to do now is to start integrating both of them. For that, let's first create a connection string. Now what's a connection string? We need a connection point or a connection endpoint which will connect the UI to my database, and for that you need to create a connection string. And how do we do that? Go to the project Solution Explorer, your project name, which is bookstore, right click, then go to properties. Now here you have a lot of properties which you can edit, which can be your how to publish, how to set your resources, how to set your manifest files and icons. For now we are concerned with settings. So we'll go to settings. Now here let us name our first setting as connection string. Now the type will be connection string and the scope will be the application. Now the value. Here when you click on value you will find this button with 3 dots for extra properties, and when you click on that you will find the server name. And now instead of typing out the server name, you can just go here, click on, this is the SQL Server Management Studio, click on the Object Explorer, you will find the local DB server name, go back, here you go. Now our database was bookstore. Now we can test our connection. Our test succeeded. So we click on OK. Now you save this setting and now you go back. Now our connection string is in place. Let's see how we can use it. And for that we need to code the GUI. Let's click on the button insert. So form1.c is design and form1.cs, which is the code. Okay. So now we have button1.click, which is the event when the button insert whose name is button1 is clicked. Now we need a namespace for the integration functions from the database to the GUI, and for that we need system.data, and we need more specifically system.data.sql client. But even if we don't know the namespaces, we can just type out the functions which we want. Like suppose for the connection of the database we need SQL connection. Now to import the namespace we can just enter alt enter, then you get using SQL.data.sql system.data.sql client as an option. When you enter, you have it imported in your code. Now let's first create a SQL connection variable. Okay, so now we need to use the connection string which we had created in the properties, and for that first we'll go to properties, then we went to settings, then this is the default because this is the first one, and connection string. Okay, now after creating the connection you open it, connection variable dot open. Now when we click on the insert button, we have to take the input as from the book name text box and the author name text box and insert it in the database. Now for that, let us create 2 string variables. Now that is book name is in text box 1 dot, which is text box 1, and author name is text box 2. So book name is text box 1 dot, we need the text value. Now string author name is in text box 2 dot text. Now we need to insert this. For that we need to create an SQL command variable In that, we need to enter the SQL string. Now, for the SQL string for insert is insert into our table name is book. So, insert into book values. We can directly pass the values in these SQL strings, but I prefer the parameterized variable method. So for that, let us introduce two parameters, 0 and 1, 0 for the book name, 1 for the author name. For now, let us keep it this way. And the next parameter for SQL command is the connection string, which is con here. Now, we need to add the two parameters, 0 and 1. For that, the command variable dot parameters dot add with value. In this, first you will pass the parameter name, which is 0 here, and the parameter value, which is book name. And the same goes for the next one, author name. Now we need to execute. Now for executing an insert command, we will safely use execute NonQuery. Now execute NonQuery tells you how many rows are affected with this statement, but doesn't give you any other quantitative output like an integer or a scalar value or a string value. So this is the best use for insert. So you can either take the value which comes out of it, like the number of rows affected, or you can just execute it without any return statement. So for now, let's keep it this way. And after this, now our insert is done, but we need to reflect the table in the data grid view. So for that, we have to write another function, private void, let us name it setGrid. Now this function will be used to, this will be invoked after every insert statement to update the grid view in your GUI. Now let's see. And before that, yes, we need to close the connection. Okay. So now let us copy the same first two statements, the connection variable and the con.open. Let us create an SQL command variable. Now we need to execute the select statement for getting all the values from the database. Select star from book, insert the connection variable, and now let us use another class from the data client, which is data adapter, SQL data adapter. SQL data adapter. Now we'll pass the command variable in the SQL data adapter. Now the adapter will contain all the rows which are extracted from the table book. Now we need to fill it in a data table, because for the data grid view in the GUI, the data source can be set from a data set or a data table. Data set is a collection of data tables, and data table is a replication of the tables in the SQL Server. It is just a copy. So now let's create a data table. We need to fill the data table with the adapter, the contents of the adapter. Adapter.fill data table. Now we need to set the data source of the grid view with the data table. But now when the code is run for the first time, before the insert, the data grid will be empty because there is nothing to initialize it with. So let us call the setGrid function in the constructor of the form. Okay, everything seems good now. Let us execute. Okay, so we have an empty data grid. Now let us insert a book name. There you go. You have the item inserted in your table, as well as the data grid view is being reflected with the change. Now if you want to cross check, let's go to the SQL Management Studio. Let us execute the select star from book. Here you have the value inserted. So that is about it for this video. For the other functions, please subscribe and stay tuned. Thank you.